Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Sins of Men by Danny J. Bradbury, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Peter Beale, the Street Urchin. I felt a sudden shaking that startled me out of my deep sleep. My eyes opened to see the dark outline of my mum's face. She looked directly into my eyes, and in her Cockney accent, "Peter, my boy, you need to steer clear a crowd of hooligans you run heat streets with. I couldn't bear lose you." She then hugged me tightly. I looked around the bleak room that we called home and saw the early morning rays start to creep in through the smoke-stained window. "I'll be safe, Mum." I loved my mom. I was only 10, but my heart ached to see her wear herself away trying to take care of us. I watched as she walked out the door to make a living doing other people's laundry. I quietly dressed, careful not to wake my siblings. The only sounds I heard were the raspy snores from one of my brothers and the crackling of a fire that heated up a small pot of gruel, our breakfast. My stomach growled. I passed on eating, knowing there would be more for my 6 brothers and sisters. I felt indestructible, but in the back of my mind, I was troubled by her words. "Where are you off, oh, Peter?" I turned back and saw my older sister, Sarah. "Mind your business. I shall return with more food. Now go back to sleep." She laid her head back on the bed. I muttered under my breath, "I'll be back." I felt the chill of the early spring day as I walked through the narrow, filthy streets surrounding High Street. We lived in an area filled with squalid, poorly built homes among the thriving brothels and alehouses. I tried to breathe in through my mouth, but couldn't avoid the stench from open sewers and accumulated trash. The noxious odor crept into every crevice. My eyes started burning from the smoke that billowed from the various dwellings' fires. It hung like low-lying clouds and made it hard to breathe. I was stopped in my tracks by the all-too-common sight of a dead body. I dared not go too close, but my curiosity was intense and I needed a better look. I swiveled my head around to make sure no one could see what I was doing and crept up to the body. It was a man lying on his side facing the wall. I had an overpowering urge to look at his face. Without taking my eyes off the body, I reached down and picked up a wooden spoon. I trembled as I jabbed the spoon into the man's back. I jumped back when the corpse belched and a horrid-smelling gas attacked me. Then I noticed movement under his jacket. I was frozen. Suddenly, several rats began scurrying in all directions. I screamed, threw down the spoon, and ran. After distancing from the body, I slowed down, catching my breath. No one paid any attention to me as I was small for my age. This was probably due to my not eating regularly. I picked up my pace. I couldn't wait to see what my mates had planned for the day. As I rounded the corner, I saw 3 rough-looking lads sitting on empty crates behind one of the pubs. I instantly smiled. "Hello, mates. How goes it?" The largest boy hopped off his perch. He was tall and thin in his early teens. He had an air about him that I was captivated by. He reached out and put me in a headlock. "How are you, young Peter?" He released me, and I turned my attention to the other boys. "James, Wally, how goes?" The brothers nodded at me. Each was barefoot and wore tattered clothes. My nostrils curled, being near them. I looked back at the leader, Andrew. "What's the plan?" I saw his expression change. He was now all business. "We had to be more careful. Yesterday was a close call. Peter, you were nearly caught." "We made mistakes trying to rob the butcher." He glared at the brothers. They shrank from his stare. "What did you lads do wrong?" They looked at each other, and James spoke first. "We got distracted and did not make sure it was safe for Peter." Andrew put his hands on his hips. "We will not make a error again. Poor Peter almost lost his head." I snickered and thought about how close that butcher's knife came to take off my head. My family could have used that meat. We rarely had any. Andrew continued. "Today we shall find a rich mark on the street and pick his pocket. We will go over the market, and once I select it odds, you will distract him." He pointed to the brothers. He then turned toward me. "Peter, it is your ask or relieve a gentleman of his coin purse." While we did this successfully several times, I still had doubts. Then I thought back to that small room crowded with starving children for whom I felt responsible. That erased any objections. We followed Andrew back to High Street and mingled with the crowd in the marketplace. It was an open-air market filled with vendors selling their wares. It was a popular spot for our gang to execute our crimes. I looked around for a place to get a better view. I craned my neck and spotted a stack of boxes leaning against a wall. I weaved through the crowd, climbed down the boxes, and spotted Andrew. He turned toward me and made eye contact. He jerked his head toward a fat naval officer. The mark. I kept my eye on the man, who seemed to be alone. He took uneven steps as he flowed with the crowd. Drunk. Without losing sight of the large man, I jumped and got in behind him. Didn't have long to wait. There was a loud shout, which I heard above the noise from the crowd. As the shoppers gathered around the source of the noise, I approached the man. He was dressed in a dark blue frock coat trimmed gold with rows of ornate buttons. There were golden epaulets on each shoulder. He wore a white powdered wig under his elaborate hat, also trimmed in gold. I knew I had only one shot at reaching into his jacket and taking his purse. I smiled at the ruckus the brothers were making and easily closed to my mark. As I was sure he was distracted, I plunged my arm under his coat. As I felt around for the bag of coins, the man suddenly turned in my direction. I saw the shocked look on his face as he clamped down on my arm. "What are you up to, boy?" My eyes darted around, looking for a possible escape. As the grip tightened around my arm, the officer called out, "Guards, I'm being robbed!" I ignored the pain in my arm as I watched 3 armed men in red coats run toward me. I scanned for the other gang members and saw the brothers melt into the crowd. While the armed men grabbed me and carried me off, I caught a glimpse of Andrew, who looked at me and shook his head. He turned and made his escape. I never saw him again. Chapter 2. Peter Beale. Prison. I cried out, "Let me go! I've done nothing wrong!" One of the guards hit me on the side of the head with the butt of his rifle. "Shut your mouth, you street urchin." I nearly passed out from the pain and felt the grip from the soldiers tighten. I looked at the man who struck me. "Where are you aching me?" He glanced down. "We are taking you to see the magistrate." I wasn't sure what that meant, but it didn't sound good. I struggled to free myself from my captors. "Stop what you're doing, or I shall strike you harder." I cowered and stopped moving. I tried to shake the fog from my head and looked around to determine where I was. I noticed a large crowd had gathered around us, and someone shouted, "String him up!" I saw the masts of ships tied up at the pier and knew where I was. They were taking me to prison. My heart sank when I saw the black metal gates at the entrance of Portsmouth's old prison. The structure looked like a castle made of limestone worn down by the elements over its many years of operation. It stood 2 stories high and was streaked with moss growing in the crevices. One of the soldiers laughed and said, "This will be your new home, lad." I had never been in prison, but I knew the rumors that once you were locked up, you never left. The guards put me down and pushed me through the open doors. I was whisked into a damp, cold room and came face to face with the magistrate. The man sat behind a large desk and wore a white powdered wig and a black flowing robe. He looked down at me. "What have we here?" "This boy was caught trying to rob Captain Nigel Thomas of His Majesty's Royal Navy." "Is that so? What say you, young man?" I knew I was in trouble and blurted out, "Is a lie." "You are an impudent lad. What is your name?" I couldn't make eye contact and looked down at my feet. "Peter Beale, governor." "Well, Master Beale, we don't look too kindly on our royal officers being robbed. You shall serve a 90-day term here at the prison. What say you?" He partially stood, placing his hands on the desk and glaring down at me. "I don't understand. What's happened to me?" "You are to be locked away here for the next 90 days, he said, motioning with his arm. I nearly collapsed. How would I survive? "Who will Elma mum where I am?" "That's not my concern. Take the boy away." I felt myself being lifted and yanked out of the office. As I tried not to panic, I was dragged toward an iron gate leading to a courtyard in the center of the castle-like building. This couldn't be happening. I needed my mum. I watched in disbelief as a short, stubby man with a large ring full of keys ambled over to the gate and unlocked it. He turned to look at me, and while he swung it open, I was tossed into the courtyard and the gate swung shut. I scampered to my feet and grabbed the bars. "What do I do now?" the man with the keys whispered. "Survive," and walked away. I stood there for a few minutes, afraid to turn around. I was overcome by being watched, and I slowly swiveled my head. I gasped when I saw the courtyard was packed with desperate-looking men and boys. There were hundreds of them, primarily dressed in rags. Many were covered in sores. They looked like skeletons covered with skin. Some of them staggered in my direction. I looked for some place to run and hide when an older man with a long white beard called out to me. "Boy, come this way." He motioned his arms toward himself. I couldn't move. As the others came closer, someone called out, "We shall take care of you, pretty lad." That broke my paralysis, and I ran to the bearded man. "Why are you here, boy?" I looked to make sure the others weren't behind me. "I ride to rob a gentleman." "You will need to do something about that accent. How long are you to serve here?" "Night and days." He shook his head. "How old are you?" "I'm end, sir." "Listen to me if you want to live. Trust no one and be on your guard at all times. Do you have any money?" I could only shake my head no. "My name is Percy. I will look after you, but I will need you to do things for me when I ask you." I didn't know what he meant, but what else could I do? He started to walk away, and I followed him. He asked over his shoulder, "What do I call you?" "Peter." "Very well, Peter. Let's get you a place to sleep, and I will show you around. Remember, trust no one." "Then why should I trust you?"